Mr. Drake, there's been so much attention over the last few days to new allegations, new documents have come out. What do you make of what you've seen over the last few days?
None of it surprises me. It's simply validation of this vast, now systemic, industrial scale Leviathan surveillance system. And it's the 12 years of growth, almost 12 years now, since 9/11. So none of what I've seen published in The Guardian or The Post surprises me.
What do you think about Edward Snowden, the NSA analyst who has now disclosed this information via The Guardian?
I consider him a whistleblower. Mm-hmm. There's no question, based on the interview that's also been published, and the nature and the information that he disclosed in the public interest. It's quite clear. He fits the textbook definition. Mm-hmm. The government, of course, as they did with me, will attempt to paint him as a traitor, that he's committing treason against the U.S., he's violating all kinds of agreements, right? And that he's creating exceptionally grave damage. That what he did is committing exceptionally grave damage against the United States.
Why do you think these things need to be out in the open?
There's no room in a democracy for this kind of secrecy, which is ostensibly done in the name of the country. In this case, it's done in the name of national security, when it's violating the fundamental tenets of your country, which in this case is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which is. But apparently, it doesn't matter anymore. That in particularly in the post 9/11 world, the Constitution is in the way. So we've essentially seen a revocation, the revoking of the fundamental underpinnings of this country since 9/11. And everything else since then is really a kabuki dance, where, in partnership with Congress, they pass enabling act legislation that allows them to conduct these activities under the veneer of law, or the color of law. The problem is that in a democracy, having this much extraordinary, even extreme secrecy is anathema to who we are. And yet the excuse is we have to do this in secret, we have to do this behind closed doors for your own sake. But how many more of our rights and our liberties do we forsake for the sake of national security? To me, that trade-off is not worth it. People keep talking about the balance, the line. I mean, Franklin's famous quote that I recast: if you'll lose both, right? You'll end up losing both your liberty and your security. It's not a trade-off. I think this is part of the false dichotomy that somehow you can't. If you have one, you have to sacrifice the other. My argument has been for all of this is you can actually have both. That your national security is actually fundamentally your liberties and your freedoms. Those are the things you preserve. Those are the things that you hold dear. You have to remember, 9/11 was a fundamental failure of that system. So I guess because the failure was so big, we have to maximally erode over time all of our freedoms and liberties. And for me, the price is not worth it. And I think Edward Snowden reached the point with what he was saying, what he was exposed to, on a worldwide scale, no doubt, that it's just not worth it. And so he made a fateful decision. He said, I'm going to disclose what I know. I was in the military, and I flew in the Cold War, on reconnaissance aircraft. And we reported back to, we called it Big Daddy. Never thought that, NSA would become Big Brother. But to have an industrial scale surveillance system that's tracking my every activity and every transaction, every movement, and combining all this information together, that Stasi in East Germany would have drooled over this capability. And it just feeds on itself, because it becomes this pathological desire to just acquire everything you can possibly know. And that was the Stasi motto, literally to know everything.
The government did a very detailed investigation of you, put you under surveillance. You, lost your job ultimately. Was it worth it for you?
Worth it? Well, I mean, is freedom worth it? Is liberty worth it? Is not living in a surveillance society worth it? Remember, I've lived it. I know what it's like to live the surveillance state, because the surveillance state was on me, riding me for so many years. And they got to they obviously wanted to do me in. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was relentless. So I wouldn't want any American to go through. I keep telling the story about what it's like to live the surveillance state, and without exception, people say, no, that's not a life I want to live. Well, if you don't want to live it, then you've got to stand up and defend the rights and the freedoms that prevent that from actually happening.